All right, so we are recording. Next, meeting norms. So please keep mics and cameras off while in the meeting. The reason we do this is just because the bandwidth it takes up on people's home networks are a lot. And I love my kids, but all three of them are probably playing Fortnite right now so that I can keep them quiet so we can get through it. So if you'll do me a favor and just keep the mics and cameras off. At the end, we will allow time to ask questions and stuff. But like I said, it's just one of those things. It's a little bit easier when the cameras and mics are off. Please place your questions in the chat. If we have to stop and answer questions, it's a little difficult to come back to, and people talk over each other. So if you're going to ask questions, if you'll throw them in the chat, I'll respond to you as quick as I can. I might even stop the presentation and then address it with Chelsea Boyd, who's actually here with us, who will be doing the majority of the talking as the expert in that ELA interventions and stuff like that. So, and then keep questions to the topic at hand. Obviously, there's lots of other stuff going on in the school, aka COVID. And I know that brings up a lot of questions and stuff. This is not the forum I'm gonna answer them in. If you want to talk to me, you're more than welcome to give me a call, that type of stuff. So please know that you know, we're gonna try to keep it to the topic at hand, just because it allows us a little bit easier to address the issue specific to that. I'm sorry, I'm letting people in as I'm talking, so if I look a little distracted, I'm doing a couple different things at once. And then finally, we will end at 8. I think the presentation itself is about a half hour. So just know that we are going to end at 8. And part of that is because I do have 3 boys and my wife's not available to help me with them. So if I do have disruptions, please know that it's them and I love them, but I'm way more patient with your students or your kids than I am with my own. So they're kind of driving me nuts today. Anywho, we're going to keep moving on. So what is Parent University? So Parent University is something that I've done in other districts. So I'm Cody Rudolph, the building principal. I'm sure you know that. And if you don't, then it's nice to meet you. But what is Parent University? So it's a way for us to connect with parents. A lot of time in parenting, we don't prepare you as parents for the educational process or different things that are going on. I always use the analogy as I did more work to drive a car with having testing and road hours, and then I had a kid and they're like, here, go home with this living human being, good luck. And I'm like, okay, so how can we help parents be informed about the process? Next, sorry. So why are we doing this? Like I said, it's to connect with you. It's to build those relationships, to impart that knowledge onto you, that transparency of what's going on in the school, what it looks like, and those different things. It's something, like I said, in COVID, it's been a little difficult to connect with parents. It's nice that we can do it from home. And the other thing too is you don't have to have your videos on or anything like that. You can just listen. That way, if you've got the 3 rabble-rousers in the background, it's no big deal. It's not like you're wrangling them to get to school or anything like that. But that's why we do it. It's because we want to help you out as parents and provide resources to you and tools to you. The other thing is parenting is inherently difficult. So any expert that we can provide to you is going to be helpful. I think a lot of these pictures here are definitely my children. Bless their heart. But it's something that when you have the right experts around you, they can help you. So that's what we're going to try to do. That's what we're going to try to do through Parent University. So what topics will we cover? The nice part about this is I'm going to get your feedback on topics. So right now we just did our first one, our intro one. Normally it's the social emotional piece. We're going to push that probably till December. But this one's going to be more about that ELA academic. A lot of the stuff at the elementary level is geared toward reading and comprehension. And a lot of that is driven by the Read by 3 laws by the state, just making sure that your students are able to read. So we will actually get your feedback on this. We'll send out surveys saying, what would you like to know? We have some tremendous people in the community. I'm trying to line up a couple psychologists talking about that that winter depression type stuff with kids. How can we prevent that? I'm looking at January and February. But a lot of this is going to be driven by you and what you would like to know. So know that. So today's topic is that ELA supports and interventions. So a lot of our academics stem from ELA. And like I said, a lot of this is state and federally driven just because of the fact that we have that read by 3 law and the retention law with that. So Chelsea Boyd is our guest. I'm gonna let her take over from here. I will be monitoring the chat and kind of chiming in from here and there, but she's kind of our expert in this, and I'll let her introduce herself and go through there.
Thanks, Cody. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I wanted to start by introducing myself. This is my first year at Brighton Area Schools. My name is Chelsea Boyd. I'm our early literacy and intervention coach. I am working in all 4 elementary schools, so I travel around to each one of them throughout the week. My concentration that I work on is really early literacy, ELA things, reading, writing, and our intervention supports for students across the district. So I do a lot with all of the instruction that goes on above and beyond what happens in the classroom, and some of the instruction that is a pull-out service inside the buildings, and I'll dig into that a little bit with you so you understand what that might look like in the classroom. I am a parent of a kindergartner at Hilton as well. He is a ladybug. And so this is his first year in school and my first year here. So we're really enjoying being bulldogs, and we are enjoying Hilton. So I really was excited that Cody had asked me to do this for Hilton Elementary, especially since I have a ladybug there. So I also am on the side of vice president of a nonprofit in the state of Michigan called the Reading League Michigan. It's kind of what moved me into a job like this. Is I do a lot with just reading instruction, professional learning for teachers, and opportunities for parents and teachers and anyone educating students to really collaborate and get some good vetted professional learning for the state of Michigan. So I'm going to talk about pretty much 3 topics tonight. The first thing I want to go over is really what are the skills that a student would need to become a reader, especially a proficient reader. What are the different pieces that go in? It's much more complicated than we think. And so it'll show you, there's a nice visual that'll kind of show you the different skills that play into how you see your students developing reading skills throughout the years, and when might be some ideas of things to work on with them. Our intervention systems at Hilton and across the elementaries, what that looks like and what we do for students that just quite aren't there yet. And then some tips for home and all the different areas of best ways to really work on reading, but really understand the little things you can do as parents to really accelerate that growth at home. So this slide has a lot on it, but I'll show you. So this is really the visual that I use. I use it with the teachers. I use it with our interventionists. I use it whenever I'm trying to explain what makes a skilled reader. So if you look, this is actually called Scarborough's rope. It's an interesting way to look at what our brain has to do in order to become a skilled reader. So if you look near the left, there's 2 big categories. There's language comprehension, and there's word recognition on the bottom. Those are 2 skills that get developed differently. So here at Brighton, the 2 different pieces of curriculum that we use to kind of develop those skills are on the top. For our language comprehension, we use the Lucy Calkins Units of Study. So that's our reading workshop model that we use. I think it's K-8. I'm still new, so I'm still trying to wrap my head around where things are and are not. And then CR Success is really the program that's used at the elementary level for building decoding skills or word recognition, so reading words off the page. So you can see on the left side under those categories, there's some different things that students need to develop. Background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures or grammar, verbal reasoning, and then literacy knowledge. They need to know words that pertain to that topic. So when you're thinking of science and social studies, there's lots of vocabulary and language and things like that that they have to learn just specifically for that area. One of the things that I concentrate on is the word recognition part, and being primarily in the K2 classrooms on working on that base skill, and then in the 3rd and 4th grade classrooms talking about students that might need a little more support in that area. So that takes you through concepts. They're called concepts, and it's where students are learning how to actually read the words off the page, or you might think of it as sounding words out. So if you look on the right, it kind of explains that there's two pathways that develop. The first is decoding, that's the bottom one, the word recognition. That's really them turning squiggles on the page into speech, figuring out what letters are, what their names are, what sounds they make, and how to blend them together to form words. And then language comprehension. Language actually starts, it's naturally developing in our brains. So our brains just naturally develop language. So you think about when your children were born, how they just pick up language. That's something that our brains naturally do. Believe it or not, reading is not part of a natural process. Our brains have actually evolved over time to figure out how to read, to communicate. So just an interesting way to look at it and think about all the different pieces inside of reading that you have to develop in order to be skilled and really coordinate word recognition and understand what you're reading. So those are the skills that you need to have. Well, not all skills develop at the same time. Just like when you're looking at child development, right? Certain things might build faster than others. Certain areas need a little more help. So when it comes to an intervention system, that's what we do when we have students that need a little bit more. So if either one of those areas are not developing as quickly as they need to in order to be proficient in that grade level, then we put supports into place for students in the building. So the nice thing is that we don't just deliver information and expect everyone to understand it exactly the way it's delivered, right? We have supports in place, people in place that give a little bit more instruction in certain areas for what kids need. So the triangle is used a lot in education to describe percentages of kids that should be in certain areas. So when we look at the green, that's most of our students need those supports. Some students might need a little bit more. And then a few of our students, a small percentage of our students might need a really intentional plan put around them to make them make progress. So one of the things that develops an intervention system, and this is part of the Read by Grade 3 law, is that students are screened on literacy skills 3 times a year. It's not a big thing. Every single student gets it in the building, and it's all the way K4. We use two different things. At the K2 level, we use what's called DIBELS. It stands for something, an acronym. We love those in education. And then NWEA is given in 3rd and 4th grade. And those screeners really dig into those early literacy skills that students need to be successful. Most of the assessments take no more than 5 minutes when it's coming to DIBELS. And with NWEA, they do it twice a year, and that can take a little bit longer for the older kids. But really, it's a snapshot of students and where they're at, and it gives us an idea of students that might be at risk. Based upon those,
remember, sorry, go ahead, Chelsea.
Oh, go ahead.
So just remember too, interventions are not, it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. I think a lot of times too, parents think of, well, my kid needs more help. That's okay. Your kid's where they're at, and that's okay. That's part of our job as educators, is to help facilitate their growth. That's why we employed Chelsea. I'd like to say that I know everything about this, but there's a reason I asked her to present, because they're really good at their job. Those EAs, and they're going to go into like win time and stuff here in a minute, but all those, just because it's an intervention does not mean it's a negative thing. It's something we do because we want to help your student. So please know it's okay to have an intervention. It's okay not to. It's just one of those things that we do. And like I said, there's no negative connotation for it. It doesn't mean anything. It just means we want to help our students grow as best we can. Do you want to go to the next slide, Chelsea? I'm sorry.
No, you're all right. I'm going to finish a couple things on here, and then we'll go to the next one. So based upon that first screener, then we go into additional assessments that determine kind of instructional groups. So the teachers will actually dig in and give some assessments that get down to the skill level that the students might be struggling in, and then they develop kind of small group instruction in class with students to really hit those skills to move them forward and monitor their progress. So that criteria also determines which students receive support from our EAs, or educational assistants, it's a program called PRISM. And what PRISM is it's an intervention program that aligns directly back with CR Success, the one we saw on the previous slide, that does decoding. And the students who are in that intervention, they're pulled in under entrance criteria, and then their progress monitored every 3 weeks for those skills. So, I see a question in the chat I'll answer right now. So how do you evaluate every 3 weeks? Is the DIBELS used every time? For progress monitoring, it is. It's the same measure. It's about 3 minutes every time. So they get only students who are targeted with intervention are progress monitored, and it's about 3 minutes. Is the same kind of thing that they do 3 times a year, but it just shows like on a graph whether they're making progress in that area so that we know what kind of instruction we need to do and if we need to build another plan. So just digging in a little bit about that intervention, if a student is in a pull-out intervention, it's during what we call win time, what I need. Every student gets what they need at that time, but I wanted to explain if a student goes with the EAs, this is what they do. So again, same language as CR Success, which is super important so that they can transfer those skills from class and transfer the skills from intervention. Their progress monitor to see growth and see if there's instructional changes. Our goal is to, when kids are ready, when they're caught up, they go back into class and do what they need there. And during win time, it's a wonderful protected time. No one does any new learning during that time. So every student in the classroom is in a specific group. They either stay with the teacher, they go with the EA, they might go to academic enrichment, they might go work on Lexia. They all have a different plan inside the class, but there's no new learning. So no one is missing out on any instruction in the classroom that they need. Another piece of the Read by Grade 3 law is what's called an IRIP. So if you're a K-3 parent and you've received one of these, I want to explain it. So this is a way for us to really be intentional and plan around what kids need in order to be proficient readers. So if you notice on the form, sorry, it's so small, it's hard to read, but really what it is the green portions that you see at the top are places where the teachers fill in data. So these are the assessments that we've been talking about on the last couple of slides. These are ways for them to monitor how close they are to where they need to be. And then when you see the yellow sections, it kind of tells you what the intervention is that they're utilizing. So are they going to be staying in class and the teacher's going to be delivering something to them? And then in addition, are they also going to potentially go to win time in RTI, which would be with our EAs? And so it just kind of indicates the plan for them. It helps us keep track of kids and check on them and make sure that they're not falling behind and that they're making progress, because our goal is always to keep track of how they're moving so that we can adjust instruction if necessary.
And also, too, the coolest thing in this with the IRIP is that it actually drills down farther than just that DIBELS, so we can identify areas of growth that students need. So it's not just we do DIBELS and we're done. We drill it down even farther so that we can target those interventions to their needs and what our students, like I said, individually need. I'll keep saying what our individual students need more.
So that's our plan that we do at school. That's what we put in place. For instance, if you have a student who's struggling in short vowel sounds, we know that. We dig in. We're able to give some specific lessons about that. If you have older students who are struggling with fluency or vocabulary, we have things that the teachers will identify that based on the data and change their instruction in class. But another great part is things that you can help with at home to accelerate or keep students reading. So we aren't just concerned about students who are struggling. We're concerned about all students. So everyone can have a challenge, right? Everyone needs to practice their reading. Everyone needs to have that rich vocabulary and language in their daily lives. So let's talk about the two different parts of that rope. So on the bottom part, the reading the words off the page, I wanted to give some little things you could do when you're reading with your students to help build their decoding skills. So one of the things to help with their decoding skills is have them read simple books with words they can sound out. Sometimes they're called decodable books, or you look at books and you're like, okay, these words seem like something they could sound out. So when your child comes to an unknown word, that's one of the biggest questions I get from parents, a lot of questions from teachers. So what do we do when we get to a word that's unknown? We want to encourage them to sound it out, encourage them to see the sounds that they know, say the sounds they know, and slide them all together. You might see your students do something like this, and that's pinching out the sounds. That's something they teach them in class. So pinch out those different sounds and then blend them all together and say them quickly. If they say a sound incorrectly or they're not sure, so it might be a sound they haven't learned yet, there is nothing wrong with providing the sound for them and sounding it out for them and asking them to blend the word together and pronounce it. It's good practice for them to hear the different pieces of the word so that they can blend it together as well. And this is the biggest question I ever get is it okay to tell them the word if they're struggling with it? Yes, it's okay to tell them words. It's not going to hurt them to tell them words. A lot of times we want to make sure that they can read. We want them to understand what they're reading. So if we tell them the words, a lot of times it takes kind of the pressure off of them so that they can move through the sentence and understand what they're reading. A great practice to do as well is if there is a tricky word inside of a sentence and they're having a hard time sounding it out and they finally figure it out, to just have them reread the sentence so they become fluent or they read quickly like a reader would read if they were reading out loud. You can also do activities to just build their awareness of the little tiny speech sounds. So if you have the word like train, t, r, a, n, those are all those little speech sounds that we have inside there. So you can do little word games. I like to do them with my son in the car because he's like trapped in a 5-point harness, so he can't really go anywhere. So we do word play in the car. So I might say a whole word and they have to say each sound every time, each of those sounds, or maybe they're outside and you say, hey, say a sound every time you hop. So k, eh, t, w, ish, right? So say those different sounds. You could also say a word like a robot and have them blend it together for you. So, hey, it's time for d, I, n, and then have them push it together. Those are kind of fun, and you can do silly words with them, but it does help them hear the different sounds inside, and it actually really helps them with spelling because they can break it down. I always think of the example of students who would spell stop, S-O-P, because they're just not hearing that T in there. So it helps them really hear the different sounds inside. You can ask them, how many sounds do you hear? And have them hold up the number of sounds. And believe it or not, older kids like that too. It's just kind of something silly, especially if you use words that to them they think are funny. All grades, but especially your older students are like 3rd and 4th graders, have them read to you and ask questions about the story. So if they're reading a book and you say, hey, read me a couple pages, and then you're able to kind of have a conversation around the story, that's super helpful. It builds that language, it builds that vocabulary, and hopefully encourages them to say, what does that word mean? So that you can explain it to them and they can build that vocabulary. Another thing about reading to students, especially if you have a child who struggles a little bit with getting the words off the page, is you can read kind of higher level books to them, and then they can have that conversation with you on something without having to really painfully go through reading the words off the page. You can read books a little bit higher than kids can read so that they can really hear that language and vocabulary. I know I keep saying language and vocabulary, but it is very important to have language and vocabulary. Reading series books where they can really get to know the characters and talking about, why do you think that happened? Or what do you think they were thinking during that time? Those are great questions for kids to kind of expand their thinking.
And I know it's one of the things too, Chelsea, just chime in again, is read with your kids. Like I know it's hard to, I know everybody's got their jobs and everything, but that's one of the biggest things that helps build that fluency and that vocabulary, especially. And then the comprehension. So don't be afraid to read to them. I know sometimes we want them to read, but it's okay to read to them and then ask them questions about the story. Get them thinking about the story and what's going on in the story. But anyway, like I said, read to your kids is a huge part of it. And I know it's hard with everybody working and sports or after school activities, but it's something that's extremely beneficial.
One of the best pieces of advice I got was have your kids read to you while you're making dinner, because it's a time where you're sitting there, they can sit up at the counter with you and read to you, and then everyone's getting their stuff done in the evening, even though, you're doing it kind of at the same time. Some strategies I wanted to just point out to avoid. There's definitely some things when students are reading that we want to avoid because they really kind of inhibit their ability to figure out what they're reading. So one of the things is we don't want to encourage them to use the picture to figure out a word. It's something that we just know doesn't work now. It's kind of a go-to strategy for kids because it's easier than sounding the word out. And sometimes the picture, it doesn't really help them learn that word. It just helps them get through the reading. And so we definitely want to be cautious with pointing to pictures to figure out words. I know a lot of parents will cover the picture until they read what's underneath and then show them the picture so that they can enjoy it. We have lots of reasons for pictures. Illustrations are great. They drive a lot of conversation. They're fun to look at. They really bring the story to life, but we definitely want them reading the words off the page. We definitely don't want to encourage guessing either. It's funny how these things just kind of naturally develop in kids. You know, my son's 5. I've never encouraged guessing or the picture, but he does it anyway because it's the path of least resistance. So they're going to say, oh, I can look at the picture, figure out that word. I don't have to painfully figure out the sounds and blend them all together. And the guessing, sometimes they'll look at the first letter and they'll just guess. And we definitely want them to look at that whole word. It just helps build that bank of words in their head so they don't have to sound it out necessarily the next time. The other part is trying to get them to memorize the word. Flashcards are fine as long as they're having to sound them out to figure them out. We definitely don't want to just do flashcards with kids because it doesn't always translate to them learning the words. But if they sound it out and then they go through, then that's perfectly fine. Those are good things to do. Or laying them out once they've sounded out the words and they can point to the word when you say it. Lots of different fun things like that. We just want to stay away from trying to just get it memorized. So I feel like I've given a lot of information in a short period of time, but I just wanted to give just some background about what we do in the school, what we do for students who are struggling. There's lots of things that go on in the classroom for all levels of students in the ELA realm, and also some great things to do at home for students to encourage reading and to really get them to work on those skills when they're at home. So I thank you for listening to me and Cody for inviting me tonight. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We still have some time if you would like to have any questions answered.
Yeah, and while if people are typing in the chat, thank you, Chelsea, for being on with us. Really do appreciate it. Like I said, she's one of the people in Brighton that you probably will not see, but she has a great impact on your student and what they do. So at this point, I don't see any questions. I am going to send out a feedback survey to everybody who participated in this and just give us honest and open feedback. One of the things we want to do is we don't want this to be a waste of your time. We want to make sure it's beneficial to you. And in that survey as well, we'll talk about what our next topic would be, what you'd like to see for the next topic. So thank you, everybody, for participating. And you're more than happy. Oh, I'm sorry. We got one question. I apologize. Can you provide any resources for helping with language comprehension? Chelsea?
I really think language comprehension, when you're talking about resources as far as how to help, is really just continuing to have those conversations, encouraging that I'm not sure what the word means so that you can explain it to them. Some of the things too is that if a student's having a hard time understanding a concept, I know this seems funny, but like, get your phone out and look it up. Like sometimes my son will ask me like, what is something? And I explain it to him and I can still kind of see that puzzled face. And so just showing them a picture is always helpful of like, well, this is what I'm talking about. So we were talking about like a hammock. We don't have a hammock. So looking that up so that they can see what that looks like. I also think that with language comprehension, when you're reading, the more you can stop and just kind of digest what you just read is helpful. That's why reading things to them a little bit above what they can read themselves helps with language comprehension as well. As far as a resource, I would say really just reading books that are a little bit higher. I don't necessarily think that we'll use highlighters too, like if you're in a book that you can highlight in, but different ways like that, or sticky notes that you can find things connecting to things around you, like, hey, that kind of sounds like what, oh, they're doing something like what we did last weekend. So making those connections for them as well and reminding them, those are all great things to do for language comprehension with students. It's really just understanding the language and things that they're reading. I hope that helped was enough
Yeah.
resources.
And there's other things too, is if you reach out to the teachers, there's some things they do within the classroom. They do like Clever, Lexia, some of those other things. We do cultures of thinking here at Hilton. And you could do a see, think, wonder. The way that works is it's pretty easy. You talk about what you see, what you read. What do you think about it? Like, what has you intrigued about it? And then the last one is what you wonder, right? Like, I wonder what's going to happen next, right? Like, my kids love the Harry Potter books, bless their heart. They drive me nuts, and then we have to watch the movie. But we have to read the book before we watch the movie. And one of the things I like is I do the see, think, wonder. Well, I wonder what's going to happen next, right? Like, I wonder, Dumbledore, what's going to happen next? And then they start thinking about that and intrigues them into what's going to happen next. So that's one of the things, like I said, that's a pretty easy strategy as a parent to do. But your teachers have a wealth of knowledge, pick their brains. I know a lot of times parents think, well, I'm bothering them. That's literally their job. So please do bother them. Please ask them what you can do to help at home, and they will absolutely tell you. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I'm actually going to stop recording right now. Thank you for participating in our first parent university. I will send out the feedback form probably early tomorrow. And if you need anything else, shoot me an email. There's Chelsea's email, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.